In this video, I'm going to take you through the gradual process of shading these facial details using charcoal pencils. Now, I've included a full list of these charcoal pencils as well as the link to the reference image in the description below, so at least you can also download this image and then practice alongside. So now let's begin with the shading. I'm going to start with the eye. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to take the soft charcoal pencil and then gradually start by shading the dark outlines. Now this dark outlines is basically going to include the eyelid lines, the outline of the iris, and those small linear, those small intricate details on the sclera. And also with the eyebrows. Now let's take our time and draw the hair strands also at this initial stage, because we don't want the hair details to fade away during the actual shading process. That is when we are going over with multiple layers of charcoal powder. We still want the hair details to be fairly visible. So let's draw the hair strands also at this initial stage. Now after shading the outlines, let's take the blending stamp and gradually smudge the shading. Now this smudging will basically make the shading appear smooth and softer. Good. Also now while smudging, I'm also going to dip the blending stamp into the charcoal powder and then gradually make a light shading of the base layer of the eye. Now this light shading, this shading process is more like blocking the form. You do this to basically have a fair idea of the tonal values of the form. However, if you are not comfortable doing this light shading or blocking using the blending stamp, you can also use a pencil. Then in that case, you might consider using a light grade pencil such as an HB graphite pencil or even your hard charcoal pencil. Also, if you don't think this process is necessary, well, you can skip it and then proceed to do the actual shading using your brush and then the charcoal dust. But personally, this process is very necessary, especially when you are dealing with a form with varied tones or quite intricate tonal values, like in this case of the eye, because the blocking is going to give you a fair idea of the tonal values of the form. It's going to make the actual shading quite easier for you. In addition, this shading process is going to help you build a very solid and vivid base layer. Good. Now after blocking the form, let's proceed to do the actual shading. Let's enhance the shading using the brush and the charcoal powder. To easily shade and render the form effectively, always start from the shadows and gradually blend into the light areas. Remember, this is a gradual process. It's going to take time. It's a very time-consuming process because you have to keep adding layers on layers of charcoal powder to effectively render a solid base layer. So take your time with this process. Now, to give you a better visual understanding of how to effectively shade using the brush and then the charcoal dust, I'm going to demonstrate to you the shading of the eye, the forehead, and then the temple. Okay, so this will at least give you a better visual reference. This will help you understand the process more effectively so that you can easily build a very vivid and a solid base layer using the brush and then the charcoal powder. So bear with me. This is going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of time. Thank you. Also, when you are shading, always remember to start from the shadows and then gradually blend into the light areas. Shadows first and then blend into the light areas. Good. Now with the base layer now vividly and solidly rendered, let's proceed to add the details. Okay, I'm going to start with the dark details. So using the soft charcoal pencil, I'm going to shade over and reinforce the dark details. So basically, I'm going to reinforce the dark values of the eyelid lines. With the details on the sclera, since these details are a bit lighter, I'm going to switch to the hard royal charcoal pencil to reinforce these details. And with the iris, I'm going to shade the whole thing black using the soft charcoal pencil, whilst leaving out the portion, that is the areas with the highlights. Now to make the edges of the iris a bit softer, as in to make it appear more softer, I'm going to shade the edges of the iris using the grey charcoal pencil. Now still on the shading, with the dark values on the base layer, I basically want these dark values to be increased. I want it to appear more darker. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to shade over this portion directly with the medium royal charcoal pencil, purposely to reinforce these dark values. Also take note that this direct shading that I'm doing with the charcoal pencil is also going to add a little bit of texture to the base layer. Okay, so now after shading directly with the pencil, let's take the brush and then brush over this pencil shading. Now this is purposely to soften the pencil shading and also to make it appear more blended into the base layer. You can go over the shading again for a vivid layer. Now the next step. Now let's proceed to draw the dark pores, the dark skin pores on the base layer. Now to easily create the realistic idea of these dark pores, I'm going to draw these pores using the pattern of dots and short lines to easily create the illusion of the skin pores. Well, you may not be able to capture all these dark details. However, if you can be more patient and conveniently draw these dark pores as accurately as perceived, then that's going to be a big plus for you in achieving a hyper-realistic skin texture, okay? So take your time and capture more dark details as much as possible as you can. Now in the shadows or the areas with the dark values, now basically in these areas, you can see that the dark pores are not that visible. Okay, so let me say they are less visible or less pronounced. So what you can do in this area is to still shade over this portion directly with your charcoal pencil to basically add a bit of texture to this layer or to this area. I'm drawing these dark pores using the hard charcoal pencil, but then you should also include a darker pencil grade such as the medium charcoal pencil for darker pores and also to avoid monotony. So as always, brush over the pencil shading to make it appear softer and also to make it appear more blended with the base layer. Moving on to the next step, let's proceed to add a highlight. Now for the strong highlights, I'm going to use the electric eraser. And with the soft highlights, I'm going to use the Tombow eraser. Okay, now I prefer to use the Tombow eraser for creating softer highlights than the kneadable eraser. That's individual preference. If you are more comfortable with the kneadable eraser and so you want to use the kneadable eraser, well, that's fine. Personally, I'm more able to create intricate soft highlights with the Tombow eraser than the kneadable eraser. So when it comes to creating softer highlights, I'm going to use the Tombow eraser. So using the Tombow eraser and with very little pressure applied on it, I'm going to erase the sclera to add more depth and to make it appear more whiter. In addition, let's use the electric eraser to create strong highlights to make the sclera appear more 3D. Now with the highlights on the skin layer, I'm going to start with the soft highlights using the Tombow eraser. Now to effectively create these soft highlights using the Tombow eraser, you have to reduce the pressure on the Tombow eraser. Again, you have to reduce the pressure on the Tombow eraser because with increased pressure on the Tombow eraser, the resultant effect is going to be strong highlights instead of the soft highlights. If the intention is to create strong highlights, then fine, you can increase the pressure on the Tombow eraser. But in this case, you want to create soft highlights, so you have to reduce the pressure on the Tombow eraser. In addition, creating this soft highlight is also going to create a gradual tonal transition between the strong highlights into the dark skin layer. Moving on, let's draw the strong highlights with the electric eraser. Now, to create the realistic impression of the skin pores, I'm going to draw these strong highlights using dotted patterns. I'm going to use series of dots to draw the strong highlights. These strong highlights will be created in between and around the dark pores. Also, you should reduce the pressure on the electric eraser to create soft highlights around the strong highlights. Now, this soft highlights is going to create a gradual tonal transition between the strong highlights and the dark skin layer. Now, using the same highlight rendering technique, I'm going to render the highlights on the forehead. Good. Now the skin texture looks okay at this stage in terms of highlights and the dark skin pores. So now let's proceed to draw the eyelashes. For the darker eyelashes, I'll be using the soft charcoal pencil and later use the medium charcoal pencil to add softer lashes. Now this is going to add more depth and realism to the eyelashes. Now I want you to take your time and draw the individual hair strands one after the other when you are drawing the eyelashes, okay, so that you can capture realism more accurately. Let's do same for the eyebrows. As earlier said, take your time and gradually draw the individual hair strands one after the other so that you can be able to capture realism more accurately. Whenever drawing the eyebrows, draw soft hair using a lighter grade pencil around the dark hair so that you can add more depth and realism to the eyebrow. Again on the skin layer, now you can use your charcoal pencil to darken the dark spots in between the highlights, basically to make the overall skin texture appear more dense and meticulous, just as being demonstrated. You can use the white charcoal pencil to reinforce the strong highlights. And finally, let's add highlights to the eyebrows to make it more three-dimensional. Darken the pores in between the highlights with your pencil to make the overall skin texture appear dense and meticulous. Now I'm going to use the hard charcoal pencil. You can use a darker pencil grade like the medium charcoal pencil or the soft charcoal pencil for very dark pores. The next step, shading the nose. I'm firstly going to shade the dark outlines, that is the nostrils outlines and the shadows at the tip and the sides of the nose. I am using the soft charcoal pencil. Next, I'm going to smudge these outline shadings with a blending stamp. This is basically to make the shading appear softer and smoother. On to the next step. Now I'm going to dip the blending stamp into the charcoal powder and then gradually make a light shading of the base layer of the nose. As explained earlier, now this light shading basically gives me a fair idea of the tonal values of the form. It also makes the actual shading a lot more easier for me. Now after this light shading, let's proceed to enhance the base layer using the brush and the charcoal powder. That is, I am going to dip the brush into the charcoal powder and then gradually go over this light shading to give the nose a more solid base layer. Now the base layer at this stage looks vividly rendered. The next step, I'm going to shade over the dark values directly with my charcoal pencil to make them more darker and to add more depth. Also bear in mind that the direct shading with the charcoal pencil, that is shading directly with the charcoal pencil, can also add a bit of texture to the layer. As always, brush over the pencil shading to make it softer and to appear blended with the base layer. You can again go over the shading if you are not satisfied with the dark value. Moving on to the next step. Now let's draw the dark skin pores. Now to achieve a high level of realism, I'm going to use a pattern of dots and short lines to draw these dark skin pores. When drawing the pores, try as much as possible to vary the pencil grades. That is, make use of the lighter pencil grade and then the darker pencil grade to achieve depth and realism. Now, varying the pencil grades will also help you break monotony in the values of the dark pores that you are creating. So as always, brush over the pencil shading to make it appear softer and also to make it appear more blended with the base layer. Okay, the next step, I'm going to shade the nostrils and the shadows using the soft charcoal pencil. I want this portion to be completely black, so I'm going to use the soft charcoal pencil. Now I'm brushing over to make the edges of the shading appear softer. I will later go over the shading with the pencil to reinforce the dark value. Good. Now let's proceed to add the highlights. I'm starting with the soft highlight using the Tombow eraser. Now bear in mind, I'm applying very little pressure on the Tombow to effectively create these soft highlights. However, you can also use the kneadable eraser. As explained earlier, I am more comfortable creating the soft highlights using the Tombow eraser. Moving on to the next step, that is the strong highlights. Now, I'm going to use the electric eraser to create these strong highlights. I'm going to render these highlights using the pattern of dots to easily create the illusion of skin pores. Now, as you are creating these strong highlights using the electric eraser, I want you to consider reducing the pressure you are applying on the electric eraser so that you can be able to create soft dotted highlights. Now, the addition of these soft highlights will help you achieve more depth and more realism in the highlights that you are creating. In order to create a tonal transition between the strong highlights and the dark skin layer, draw soft highlights around the strong highlights, just as I am doing. And finally, darken the pores in between the highlights with your pencil to make the overall skin texture appear dense and meticulous. Now I'm going to use the hard charcoal pencil. You can use a darker pencil grade like the medium charcoal pencil or the soft charcoal pencil for very dark pores. Good. So let's use the same shading technique to shade the remaining parts of the face. Watch till the end. Now feel free to ask any question, ask anything bothering your mind regarding this shading in the comment section below. I'll be on standby to answer your questions. Good.
you.